Welcome to the discussion on homeostasis. Think logically. Your body likes to be in a very narrow range of all sorts of things. If you change temperature every time you went outside, and I don't mean your skin, but all the way down into your blood, into your guts, like if your whole body changed temperature every time you went outside, your body would be hot and cold and hot and cold. It would not be the kind of thing that would be good for living the complex lives that we all live every single day. So we need to be able to regulate ourselves. That's where this term homeostasis comes in. It is the tendency of an organism or a cell to regulate its internal conditions. This stabilizes the health and functioning regardless of the outside changing conditions. Can you think of some examples of how your body maintains homeostasis within itself? Hopefully, you thought about a few, and maybe some of these: body temperature, blood pressure, blood pH. There are lots of other things too, like how acidic your stomach is, how much saliva that you produce so that you can break down food effectively. All of these things are under the term homeostasis. In other words, our body trying very hard to keep itself within a narrow range so that you can live, again, your very busy life. Now, the first example on the previous slide was body temperature. So let's talk a little bit more about thermoregulation and how your body manages to keep that 98.6 degree temperature that you like to be all the time. Thermoregulation is the ability of an organism to keep its body temperature within certain boundaries, even when the surrounding temperature is very different. Think about this. Imagine the last time that you had a fever. Maybe it was just 100 or 101, or if you were really unlucky, maybe up to about 103. Even at 100-degree temperature, you're miserable. You don't feel well. You feel run down. Maybe you just want to lie on the couch, drink some fluids, just keep yourself quiet, because that tiny change in your internal temperature is enough to throw you off and enough to make you feel ill. Now think about the fact of, imagine if every time you went outside to the bus stop, whatever the temperature was outside, your body adjusted to that quickly. It's January, it's negative, degrees out. Your body starts to drop in temperature. That would be really scary. Or imagine that you went, to the desert and you step outside the car and it's 120 degrees in Death Valley and your body temperature starts to rise rapidly. You wouldn't be able to do these things. You'd need to live in basically a temperature-controlled bubble. But of course, humans wouldn't have progressed to this state in our evolution if we had to live inside a temperature-controlled bubble. So thermoregulation is a really fascinating ability that your body has. How do we keep ourselves from overheating? If you look at the desert fox there, maybe you can see some features of him that allow him to maintain his temperature. I'll give you a moment to think about it, and then I'll talk about some. Maybe you thought that he could go back to his burrow and hide, but he can't do that all the time. So he has to have some ways that he can be outside in the very hot temperature without becoming overheated. So number one, look at his coloration. He's a very light color. This allows the sunlight to literally bounce off him. If he were a black fox in the desert, he would absorb so much more heat. Number two, look at his ears. Look at how enormous they are. They're not just there because it's an adorable feature. They're there because they have lots of blood vessels in them. And his body will pump blood through his ears, and that the heat that's in his blood will actually evaporate out into the surrounding environment. And in that way, he's able to keep his brain temperature down and the rest of his body temperature down so that he can, go and catch the mouse or go and catch the grasshopper that he's after in the desert. The name of what he's doing is vasodilation. What that means is that the blood vessels that are in his ears, when it's really hot out, those blood vessels will physically get larger. In other words, they will increase their surface area. More surface area, more surface area exposed to the outside, more heat that's able to vent through every individual blood vessel. And when you multiply that out over thousands of blood vessels, it actually ends up being a lot of surface area that this little guy creates just by widening out his blood vessels, giving that bigger surface area and allowing that blood to come closer to the environment so that it can vent out, the heat can vent out of the blood more readily. But it's not just keeping ourselves from overheating that we have to worry about. We also want to be able to keep ourselves from getting too cold too. This is called vasoconstriction, and it's when the blood vessels physically shrink down, physically become smaller. Maybe you've had this experience too. So when you go outside in the winter, and let's say you were foolish and you forgot your gloves and the tips of your fingers start to turn a little white, and maybe you tuck them underneath, your armpits so that they, they don't get too cold. Well, that vasoconstriction is a really important protective skill for your body. Think. You can live without fingers. You can't live without a pumping heart. And so what your body's doing is it's actually squeezing down the blood vessels. It's constricting how much blood can go to things like your fingers and toes. And it's keeping that blood in the center of your body around your heart and your lungs and your kidneys and all those really important internal organs so that your body can continue to live until you can get to a place where you can get your fingers and toes warm again. Now, I realize that this is pretty extreme. And that generally speaking, we can put on gloves or jackets or be in our heated cars. But this kind of evolutionary item happened way back in our evolutionary history, in a time in which maybe getting to shelter wasn't quite as easy as it is now. If your vasoconstriction gets to a really severe point, it can be called hypothermia. So here's some pictures of what that actually looks like. The middle, oops, sorry about that. The middle one is a normal artery. Look at the thickness of the wall. Look at the fact that the blood is in the middle amount. Now, when it's really hot out and my little fox wants to get cool, look at how you can thin down the walls of your artery. You can make this space, this internal space, bigger. Look at how there's more blood in this artery. And that way, it has less distance to go through to be able to vent to the outside world. Now, it's really cold. Your body's trying to preserve and to save itself. Look at how thick the artery wall gets. Look at how there's a whole lot less blood that's able to go there. That's what causes your fingers to turn that kind of whitish color, because it's literally pulling the blood away from the tips of your fingertips and the tips of your toes. And then as your body gets more and more desperate, it will actually start to constrict the hand and potentially some arteries in the arm. At the bottom, we have two kind of silly pictures. We have the penguins. Obviously, penguins would never put on a sweater in hot weather because that would make them overheat. That would make them need to undergo vasodilation, or to dilate those arteries. Over here, this woman, she's clearly jumped out of the hot tub, jumped onto the snow-covered chair, and right now her body is constricting. It's pulling that blood out of her fingers and pulling it towards the center of her body because it doesn't want her to die in this cold, extreme cold. I just wanted to show you one photograph. This is a really nice diagram that explains a little bit better about how your body maintains homeostasis. So, you are a human. As your body temperature falls, the blood vessels constrict so that heat is conserved, okay? Now, heat is retained and normal body temperature eventually returns. Body temperature rises, the vessels dilate, resulting in heat loss to the environment, okay? When the heat is lost to the environment, normal body temperature is maintained. And so this is how your body allows you to go out into the world when the world is hotter than 98.6 and when the world is cooler than 98.6 without your body temperature changing dramatically. Evolution is an amazing thing. Hopefully it's something that you're interested in, and it's something that we'll really come back to down the end of the year.